Hello and welcome back to Ari Wanders. Today our video is going to be a little bit of a throwback to when I lived in South Korea. If you have not seen those videos, it's because it was a while ago. I will link the playlist up here. Let's say I was just learning how to make videos back then. Actually, still learning now. Anyway, I lived in Korea for about 6 years. And let me tell you, you live any place long enough, you will have some strange stories to tell. Oh, there are stories. So without further ado, let's get into the story about how I got fired in a foreign country, and spoiler alert, it all turned out okay. Now, fortunately, this was not my first teaching experience in Korea. If it had been, I do not think I would have lived there very long. My first ever teaching experience in Korea was actually through a university where I was really more of a tutor for other students. They were studying in university in their second language, which is, I have no idea how they did that. My second experience teaching in Korea was a full-time job. I was a real teacher now. I was teaching kindergarten kids all the way up to about the age of 12 or 13. And overall, it was a really good experience. We did work really hard. There were definitely some long hours. There was a lot of stress, which kind of comes with any Korean workplace. They have a very different idea about how work looks. The school was great at training me, teaching me. I learned from my mistakes and I became a better teacher. After working at the school for a couple of years, I decided I wanted a little bit of a change. As I said before, working at the school was great, but the hours were long and it was stressful. And I decided to just seek out what my other options could be. Could I get a more condensed schedule and have a little bit more of a life outside of work? So I started interviewing at several different schools and I found a school that I really liked. There were several things I liked about it. First of all, it was a little bit smaller. It was near the school that I had worked at before, so I was familiar with the area. I would still be close to people that I knew, and all that seemed good. It seemed to be a really nice school. I liked the teaching philosophy that they presented, and everyone just seemed really nice and relatable during my interview. On top of that, I really appreciated that they had a lot of diversity in the teachers that they hired, people from different countries, people from different races, and in Korea, the hiring can be somewhat biased. That would take a whole nother video to get into that. If you're curious about that, I can try to cover it. But I noticed a lot of diversity in the teachers that they already had there, and that just made me excited. I felt like it would be a place that I would fit in, be able to make some friends, and just have a healthier work environment. Also, when you work and teach in Korea, we'll usually provide an apartment for you. It is a little bit difficult to get an apartment on your own in Korea, and so a lot of times Hagwons have pre-rented out apartments that they use for their teachers that year. And the apartments that they had were nice. I mean, I had an ocean view from my apartment. It was between buildings, you could see the ocean. It was about a 5-minute walk from the beach, which was great for me and my dog. And as a little Ohio girl, I was like, that sounds great, sign me up. And so a few months later, I started my new job. I moved into my sparkly new apartment and got to work. Of course, starting at a new school, you kind of have to learn the way that they do things. So learning new curriculum, classroom practices. They did a couple of training days. They didn't really tell us about the training days ahead of time. You assume that there's gonna be training on a new job, but this in particular school, which we will find out why later, had a complete turnover of all of its teachers every single year. And so it wasn't just like, oh, there's 1 or 2 new teachers that we need to integrate into the system. It was, I think, 11 or 12 teachers were leaving, and then 11 or 12 new teachers were coming in, and they had to train every single one of them how to do things their way all at once. And that meant when we started work, you had no one that you could ask, like, oh, how do you usually do this? Or what did you do last year? No one knew. No one knew because no one had been there except for the head teacher or any of the Korean staff. But I didn't think much of it at the time. Now I completely understand it. So went through those couple of training days and then started my first day at the new school. Everything seemed more or less fine. I was one of the more senior teachers there, and so I tried to help out the other teachers, some of whom had never taught before or never lived in Korea before, kind of how to do things, give them advice, icebreakers, games, worksheets, things like that. I tried to be helpful. In my mornings, I had a class of it fluctuated a little bit. It started out with like 9 and it went up to a max of 11 4-year-old students. They were absolutely precious. We did have a couple of behavior problems in the class, which it happens. They're 4, it's their first time away from home. It did make things a little bit awkward on the intro because I'm trying to show that I know how to teach a classroom of children, and then I have some kids who have learning disorders or just extremely shy and miss mom. Obviously, the safety and the security of the kids was always my priority over even my pride sometimes. I should also mention that within this classroom, I also had a helper teacher and a co-teacher, and they were absolute gems. There were some communication difficulties over time, but overall, those 2 women, they are rock stars. I love them, and I am grateful to this day that they were the people who were working with me. The helper teacher is basically kind of like the extra mom in the class. She can speak Korean to the kids if they have a breakdown, or sometimes they would fall asleep in class. It's a long day, and she was just there to help out and be an extra set of hands because I was severely outnumbered. And then my co-teacher would teach phonics classes and do some activity classes with them later in the day. And she was a lot more involved with the parents than I was. Because she was native, she could speak Korean, and so she would do all the phone calls with them and things like that. It was a lot of responsibility for her. So things went on. I thought things were going well, but over the next month or so, things were kind of weird. The interaction that I got was overly friendly, but like in a passive-aggressive manner. So the principal of the school or my co-teacher or the head teacher, they would be really friendly and smiley to my face, and then I would get a correction letter on my desk, whether it be a sticky note, and then I eventually started getting official, like, this is what you did wrong and we will fire you if you do not change kind of letters on my desk. Every time this happened, I would bring the information to them and be like, why didn't you just talk to me? There were all kinds of things. We had a miscommunication about when I was supposed to be at work. All teachers are expected to get there early, but I didn't understand how early they wanted me to be there. And so as soon as they said something, I came at the time they asked me to. They didn't like the outfits that I wore very much, which according to the dress code policy they laid out before me, I thought I was within the guidelines, but again, when they corrected me, I sought out a solution. I bought new clothes to wear, and I thought we were good. And then there was more correction. They did not like that I went home during lunch. I had stated in the interview that I had a dog and she needed to be walked and fed in the middle of the day. And so I would go home for lunch and take care of her and then come back. It was like a 10-minute walk home, and I had over an hour break. So you can see where this shouldn't be an issue. But they are really upset that I was leaving the building in the middle of the day, and said that I couldn't do that anymore. And I let them know that I was gonna be doing it because I was responsible for this dog, and they knew that beforehand, and it turned into this big thing. I just kept doing what I know that I had agreed to, and they kept being mad that they'd agreed to it. Next, and this seemed to be kind of the fallback correction that they would give me, was they would say that I was callous and not loving or warm towards the children. Obviously, that's very hurtful commentary to get back. When they gave us the training session, they had several slides on child physical conduct, which is very, very important, especially when working with different cultures, okay? So you have multiple people from multiple different countries that have different rules on how you interact with other humans and children physically, and you have them all in one area. You need to have a common understanding of this is okay and this crosses a boundary. So they went over that in training, and a lot of this was just like physical boundaries, ones that I thought were good, totally reasonable. So I followed these guidelines, and I was very, very careful with how close I would let the kids get to me. They even had like limitations on hugging with the kids, which I had never experienced before in the Korean kindergarten setting, but if that was the rule, that was the rule, and I was gonna respect that. But then I actually got pulled into the office one day, and they were talking about how like, oh, you're not warm towards the kids, it's like you don't care about them, it's like you don't love them, and I was like, what? Excuse me? And so we got into it more, and it turned out that they were upset that I wasn't interacting with the kids in a more warmly physical manner, not hugging them or, you know, high-fiving them enough, or, you know, letting them like touch me or hold on to me. And I was like, well, you kind of warned us about that in the training session, so I've been really cautious. You know, you set up boundaries with me and these kids, and I respect that, and so I'm following it because the kids are my priority. And they were like, oh, no, we didn't mean that for you. You're a female teacher, like you should be warm, like you're their mother, right? They miss their mom, act like their mom. And I was like, okay, I can be more warm. And again, some of this might be another cultural difference. I was raised in a very German family, in a very German community, and warm by German standards can be more along the lines of, I fed you, I sheltered you, therefore you are loved. So anyway, there was that correction, and yeah, it was just such a strange piece of feedback to get. But I mean, I was in love with these kids. Like, keep in mind, these are a group of 4-year-olds that I interact with 4 to 5 hours every day. And these were 4-year-olds, you know, they're learning how to tie their shoe with me. They're learning their colors. They're learning how to interact with their classmates for the first time. We're learning a new language together. We're doing science projects, and they're learning new things. And it's just so exciting. And because they're 4, you know, some of them would fall asleep in class. There was one girl, and she just really missed her mom during the day, and she would ask me to hold her. And once I knew that that was okay, I would hold her and actually teach, like with this little kid on my hip, and she would fall asleep on my shoulder. It's the cutest thing. I miss that darling little girl so much. So all of this is going on, and as I mentioned before, this is the important part for if you end up teaching in Korea. They had given me not 1, but 2 official letters that stated things that they were unhappy with, that were against my contract in their interpretation, and it was like officially signed and had like the school's letterhead, that kind of thing. If you get those kind of letters, they are documenting the ability to fire you. Without official letters like that they have given you a copy of, they cannot fire you without cause. They need to give some kind of notification. So as I'm getting these letters, it's getting into my head, they're trying to fire me, but I didn't know what to do about it. Then one morning, after about 4 months of working there, I was called into a meeting. The director, the head English teacher, and the head Korean teacher were all present, and I knew something was going on. And sure enough, there was. I was getting fired.
You're fired.
They called me in, they calmly sat me down and told me that I would no longer be required to work at the institution anymore, but that I could keep teaching for 30 days while they found a replacement. Clearly, they weren't too worried about having a completely unsuitable teacher teaching their children for 1 more month. I stayed relatively calm at first, and I just asked, why? I thought that was a reasonable question after all we had been through together. And this is when I found out how incredibly evil of a woman my boss was. These were the reasons that they listed for firing me. They told me that I didn't love the kids. I don't know exactly how you quantify that. They told me I did not have friends at work. They told me they only hired me because I was pretty, which I feel like that makes you look bad, not me, but anyway, I'll take the compliment. It was just, ouch. I mean, telling a kindergarten teacher that they don't love kids and the 4-year-olds that they've been teaching for the past 4 months don't love them, that's just brutal. They were out to make this personal, but I knew that there was nothing I could do. I considered walking out then and there, but to be really honest, I needed the apartment and I needed the next paycheck. So begrudgingly, I stayed. I walked out of that meeting, and to my delight, the entire class of 4-year-olds who was waiting for their teacher, who was 10 minutes late to class because of this meeting, were running out of the classroom, hugging my legs, asking, "Where have you been? We missed you." And me, I was just taking a casual back look to my boss, making sure she had heard that. I got through the rest of the day, but needless to say, I was crushed and I needed to find a new job fast. Remember when I said that Korean Hagwons usually provide your apartment for you? Well, the problem is when you get fired, you don't have anywhere to live anymore. So I was facing being homeless within a month and having my visa not renewed. I was up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, 2 broken arms, and I looked down and the water was full of piranhas. This was not good. During this process, I had a couple of close friends point out to me, maybe, just maybe, this is a blessing in disguise. And I didn't want to hear it. I was upset, I was angry, I was furious, and I was hurt. I could not see how this situation of me being jobless and then potentially homeless without a place to go could ever possibly be something good. My world had been shook up and I did not like it. But fortunately, as stubborn as I am, eventually these words were able to sink in. Maybe this could be a blessing in disguise. And that was my turnaround point. I found a much better job. It was in a different area farther away, but I ended up really liking that area. That job provided so much more free time, and I worked there for an entire year and made really dear friends with the owners. They were amazing, wonderful people who I'm so glad that I got to meet and had the honor of working for. And I didn't know it then, but that job ended up being exactly what I needed for all the hardships that were ahead that year. It was literally like I had to be taken out of the job that I was in to put me in a better position. It was totally a blessing in disguise. There were definitely hiccups along the way, like at the new job, my new apartment fell through, so I actually ended up being homeless for about 2 weeks. Fortunately, a friend took me in and neither my dog nor I had to live on the beach. But everything worked out, and I am so grateful for that job opportunity to this day. So let me know what you learned from this little story. Let me know if you have any questions, or if you're thinking about teaching at a Hagwon and you have literally any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to try and help. But the thing that I personally learned from this is that even a seeming disaster can actually be the best thing for you in the moment, and you might just not see it yet. Keep that optimism and some hope, especially if you are a Hagwon teacher in South Korea. You're gonna need it. Sorry, but you're gonna need it. Stay strong out there. Fighting! So I hope that you enjoyed this little story. I hope it was entertaining or informational, or that at least you watched till the end. Please hit that like button, because I had to work hard for this story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more wandering adventures, and then I will get to see you next time. Until then, keep wandering.